Hello, folks. Officer Tony here. If you're new to the channel, here's what you should know. Ricky makes crappy videos, and then I gotta edit them. Yeah, today's video is about the capacitors. Stay tuned.
Hello, Richard from budgetguitarist.com. Today we're going to talk about tone pots and more specifically about capacitors because, as I hinted last week, in last week's non-video, I got these cool Russian capacitors sent to me by viewer Amazing Joe, who was amazing for sending me these cool caps. So we're going to listen to them. But before we do that, I've got a short presentation to kind of explain to you how a tone circuit works, like what a capacitor does, the different kinds, etc., and so on. So let's go through that, then we'll come back and we'll check out these caps. Today we're going to look at how tone pots work, the different kinds of capacitors, and then I'm going to play through a couple of Russian-made capacitors sent to me by viewer Amazing Joe, and we're going to compare them to the capacitor in my PRS S2 Satin 24. Let's begin with some nerdy stuff. What is a capacitor? Well, a capacitor is a storage device. It stores electrical energy in an electric field. It has the capacity to store energy, hence the name. A capacitor can store voltage sort of like a battery, but we don't use those kind of capacitors in electric guitars. We use capacitors to filter out high frequencies. So what you really need to know is the way we measure them and the different types used. So how do we measure capacitors? Capacitors are measured using microfarads, written as μF. Yeah, the first character that looks like a messed up U is pronounced mu. It's a character that's used as a multiplier, and if you're a science nerd, you're probably laughing at my attempt to pronounce it. Anyway, the higher the value, the higher the capacitance, so the darker the tone. So a bigger number means removes more highs. If you see a value of picofarads, which is lowercase p, uppercase f, picofarad, well, here's the conversion rate. So 0.022 microfarads is equal to 22,000 picofarads. Most people will use microfarads though. In general, guitar builders want 0.047 microfarad caps for single coils and 0.022 microfarad caps for humbuckers. But a lot of people do whatever they want. I think Lawler Pickups uses like 0.017 for basically every pickup. Anyway, capacitors also have a voltage rating, but anything that's half a volt or higher will work. There's no real need to go with a cap that can handle 600 volts in a tone circuit. Okay, let's talk about types of capacitors. Ceramic disc. This is a cheap way to make a capacitor. You could buy one of these for about 80 cents, but no doubt if you buy them in bulk, they're probably cheaper than that. These have a high tolerance, so 20% or worse. And basically what that means is it can be off, the value can be off by 20%. That is a high tolerance. I would hope that guitar makers would actually test their ceramic disc caps for tolerance before they use them, but basically they can be all over the map, or as the British people like to say, all over the shop. Mylar polyfilm capacitors. Now these are used in higher end guitars, and these are usually a lower tolerance, like 5% or less, so they're going to be more accurate. They also have a lower failure rate, which is important. Photo here is some orange drop capacitors, which you might have heard of. I put those in my Gibson Les Paul. There are other kinds, like paper and oil, and paper and oil capacitors are made with, you guessed it, paper and oil. These can go for up to 28 bucks each. Now, they're very cool looking, but most experts agree they don't really do anything magical to your tone. And most guitar builders use either ceramic or poly based on their budget. Sonic differences. The biggest factor in sound is going to be the actual measured value. So the higher the value, the more highs are removed. Most people don't have the equipment to accurately measure these differences, so we need to use our ears. You might like more or less high end to be removed. Now, many experts believe the type of capacitor does not matter, but they all agree that higher quality is better than cheap junk. Why? Well, they're less likely to fail, and they're more likely to be close to the actual value they're supposed to be. So those are two reasons to spend a little more money on a cap. Okay, enough with the nerdy stuff. Let's listen to some capacitors. So again, these were sent to me by viewer Amazing Joe. They are Russian made, and that is literally all I know about them. I don't know the values, but it doesn't matter. What matters is how they sound when they remove high end. So let's check them out right now. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play through them, but I want to show you how. I kind of built something for this. Okay, so this is an old iPhone 3GS box because I had an iPhone 3GS at one point. And I originally built this box as like one in, 2 out, just for like doing quickie tests. I would not gig with this, right? This is just for messing around. So then for this video, I decided to add a tone pot. And so you can see kind of my wiring inside. But instead of putting the tone pot right between the third lug and the ground, what I actually did was I soldered up 2 alligator clips. So this way, I can test out external components like, capacitors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first play you the cap that's inside my PRS, this guy right here. And then I'm going to try this one, and then I've got another one to try, this guy right here. So we're going to try all 3 of them and see what they sound like. Then we're going to come back here and talk about it. So there you go. One thing I will tell you is, like, in the room, I can definitely hear a difference between all three of those caps. Now, I'm not going to say the difference is massive because the difference is not massive, but I can hear it. The problem is, right, me playing direct into my little studio monitors and listening, that's got to get recorded into a DAW and then uploaded to YouTube and then compressed by their stuff and then played back through whatever speakers you have. So if you have headphones, you might have been able to hear more of a difference. If you're listening on a phone or a computer, you might not have heard any difference at all. I don't know. You tell me. I can tell you in the room, I heard the difference. The difference was subtle. So what have we learned? Well, the real reason to spend money on good caps is tolerance and failure rate. They're going to be a lower tolerance which means they're going to be closer to what they're supposed to be, the value they're supposed to be at, right? And they're going to be less likely to fail. Now, how often do ceramic capacitors fail? I've seen it happen one time. They don't normally fail. So how big of an issue is that? Well, I mean, if you can spend a little bit more money and get something that is a lot more reliable, it's worth spending. Now, what if some really cool person decides to send you some Russian-made caps that look really, really solid? Well, I'll tell you what you do with those. You put them in a guitar and you use them and enjoy them, and you thank the person. So thanks, Amazing Joe. I'm not quite sure which guitar those are going to go into, but probably whatever my next build is, because they are indeed really cool. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again next Friday at 5.